This was supposed to be a video about the Beast of Gevaudan, the wolf-like creature in the 1700s in France that killed 113 people before getting taken out with a silver bullet. You see, my co-author and I have started a new project, a dark fantasy that was going to be set in a world like our own during the Age of Sail. Except there were so many elements of the unexplained going on back then that we decided there was no point in creating a fantasy world. We would just use this world and do the story as an alternate history. Unexplained events, like the story of the Beast of Gevaudan. So, I was going to explain it. But, in placing the beast in the broader context of the most prolific man-eaters of all time, I came across the story of the two most prolific man-eater hunters of all time, Jim Corbett and Kenneth Anderson, and their dogs. I made it past the story of Jim's dog, Robin. Might have teared up a bit, but I made it. I did not make it past the story of Kenneth and his dog, Nipper. And when I saw that Nipper doesn't have a single video dedicated to him on YouTube, not that I could find, I felt I had to right the wrong. Nipper, this one's for you. The early 1900s was the heyday of man-eaters. There was still a substantial population of things like big cats at this time, and the ever-increasing population of humans was driving them out of their habitats and pinching off their food supply. Some of these animals resorted to eating humans. Some acquired a taste for it. For over 20 years, Jim Corbett was the go-to guy when a man-eater needed to be hunted down. His name became legendary early on when he shot and killed the so-called Devil of India, a tigress with 436 kills. Still holds the Guinness record for most humans killed by a single animal. In his book, The Man-Eaters of Kumaon, Jim said he never wanted a hunting dog. In the jungle, hunting ferocious game, a hunting dog like a mastiff or a group of hunting dogs creates as many problems as it solves. But Jim was a softy, and one day, he says, he was accosted by someone selling puppies. Out of the 7 remaining pups, the runt of the litter, starved by the others, looked like it was about to die. Jim says the dog somehow made it to its feet, crawled out of its box with its last remaining strength, limped around him once, and then settled down at his feet. Even once it recovered and began to grow, Robin was never a powerful dog. Not a mastiff, not a German shepherd. Robin, you're looking at him, was a dumpy little thing with a weak heart. He couldn't even run for any significant distance before passing out. Didn't matter. Robin somehow got it into his head that his new master needed help on his hunting excursions. Jim writes, when armed, he only left Robin at his India home once, when he went out birding. And although he doesn't quite spell it out, he certainly insinuates that Robin put up such a protest that he never did it again. The Wikipedia article on Jim Corbett says that he often went hunting with his dog Robin. That's not what he said. Jim Corbett said that after that first time, quote, for 13 years I never left my house with a rifle when I didn't have Robin with me. Corbett had an amazing career. He took out 33 man-eaters total. Man-eaters that had totaled an unbelievable 1,200 human victims. England gave him the honorary rank of a colonel. India was so grateful that they renamed their first state park after him upon his death. This was after their emancipation from England, when they were changing everything that was English to Indian names. But could he have done it without the dog? Corbett didn't think so. He said that when he went after his prey, if he could see the tracks, he would lead and Robin would follow. When he couldn't see the tracks, Robin would lead and he followed. This dog had one of the most dangerous jobs in the world prior to modern bomb-sniffing military dogs. He had to sniff out the creatures, not panic while Jim fired rifles right next to him that were incredibly loud. And some of these man-eaters got very close. How big a part of this was the dog? Well, after Robin's death, Jim Corbett said this, I bought him for 15 rupees, that's a few pennies, but I wouldn't have traded him for all the gold in India. Of the former litter runt, nearly dead when he bought him, he said, Robin was the biggest-hearted and the most faithful friend. He's gone to play in the happy hunting grounds where I know he'll be waiting for me. Not a bad eulogy for a litter runt with a bad heart. By the mid-1940s, Jim Corbett was pushing 70, and it was time for another hunter to emerge. Once again, a man-eater was terrorizing Southeast India, the spotted leper of Gamalapur. When Kenneth Anderson began to hunt it, this leopard had already killed 42 men, women, and children. And this man-eater wasn't content to attack humans in the woods. No, this creature had taken to the horrifying practice of entering villages, breaking into homes, and dragging the residents out of their beds at night, then killing them. Anderson arrived at the village where the animal had been active. And this time, as was so often the case with Corbett, Anderson received no help from the locals for 3 nights. We're going to talk about that in the next video. He sat alone in the town streets, waiting for the creature to attack. When it finally presented itself, Anderson said that he was never even able to get off a shot, that this animal seemed so intuitively understanding that it knew that this man was there to hunt it, not the other way around, and so it fled. A quick aside, in his account recorded in his book, The Call of the Maneater, Anderson consistently refers to the creature as possessing a diabolical intelligence. He believed it was possessed by a demonic spirit. In fact, part of his preparation prior to the hunt was to collect a protective talisman from a local shaman that he could wear around his neck. This question of metaphysics is something we're going to come back to when we cover the Beast of Gevaudan. Alright, back to the story. On his 4th night, having tracked the leopard to another village, Anderson reports that he was sitting in the street when he was approached by a cur, as he calls it, a mutt. In his book, he calls it a pariah dog. You see, India had a strict caste system, and the bottom level, the dregs of their society, were known as pariahs. And not only were the higher castes supposed to not even associate with the pariahs, they weren't even supposed to allow themselves to brush up against one of these unclean individuals. Anderson is telling us that no one was feeding this dog. If they'd even found it trying to eat out of their refuse, they would have shooed it away. No one was showing this dog any kindness, and clearly it had reached the point where it needed that in a desperate way. For his part, Anderson was just lonely. It had been 4 days now of isolation, he in the streets, the villagers shut up in their huts, and Anderson wanted some company. So he writes that he gave the dog part of his sandwich that he had for dinner and a few small biscuits. The dog must have been losing sleep in the past days and weeks as its situation became more and more desperate, because Anderson reports that once it had substantial food in its stomach, that all it could do was curl up at his feet and go straight to sleep. Finally, it felt like it could relax. But not for long. It had only been asleep for a couple of hours when Anderson reports that it startled awake and began to shake with fear. Anderson knew that it was smelling the leopard, and the smell must have been terrifying. This dog wouldn't have been anything close to a match for a spotted leopard, even if it was healthy, let alone in its current state. On top of that, this was no ordinary leopard. Could the dog smell the human blood on this animal? Did it know what was different about this creature? At this moment, the dog would have had a choice to make. It could run, leave his newfound friend to his horrible fate, or it could stay and become this man's dog. Do what that kind of dog does: defend its master. And this dog made its choice. And that choice is why I made this video. Anderson says the dog rose up on all fours and began to alert. It began directionally barking, following the leopard and revealing its direction as it made its approach. This was crucial because the leopard wasn't on the ground anymore in front of Anderson. No, in the dark, it had jumped onto the roofs of the local huts and was angling to get behind him. Anderson said that when he realized what was happening, he jumped under the overhanging roof of a nearby hut, put his back to the wall. A moment later, he said he could hear it on the roof above him. But he couldn't aim because the creature still had multiple directions it could attack him from when it jumped down. At the last second, the dog jumped out into the street and began barking wildly at the side that the beast was coming from, revealing its approach and drawing its attention. Anderson said that this saved his life. He had just enough time to turn and fire from the hip without even aiming while the leopard sprang at him. The bullet struck, and Anderson jumped out of the way, the leopard crashing into the wall of the hut next to him. Anderson then turned and shot it twice more. The leopard would die of these wounds, but at that moment it was still moving. And at this point, the cur, the mutt, that had taken risk after risk, did something that even Jim Corbett's dog never did. It attacked. Anderson wrote that it dove in at the still-moving man-eater, the creature that had killed 42 human beings, and it began tearing at its throat with his teeth. until the creature was well and truly dead. Anderson was, as you can imagine, deeply touched by this. So much so that he ends the chapter on his most famous kill, talking not about the fame or any reward he received, but talking about the dog. The dog that came walking up out of the evening light and claimed him as its owner one night, right before he was about to be killed. He says, "I took the cur home, washed it, fed it, and named it Nipper. Nipper has been with me many years since then, and never have I had reason to regret giving him the few biscuits and sandwich that won his staunch little heart and caused him to repay that small debt within a couple of hours by saving my life." And here they are, Kenneth Anderson with his dog Nipper, the dog who, with one heroic deed, went from a pariah, starving in an Indian village, to a loved and cared for friend for the rest of his life. This is David Reichert from The Bunker. Our second book, Fluid Shock, is now available from our publisher or from Amazon. Don't miss the next book in our award-winning pandemic horror series, The Holocaust Engine. Link below.